I always say this a lot when I open these videos, but honestly, it is true. There is so much craziness, incompetence, like clownish behavior going on in some of these reform councils. It's often difficult to try and pick what's the best one to cover because I can only make so many videos in a day. Um, But we are coming up to a little bit of holiday period at the moment, so I will be more free to do some live streams in the next coming weeks. So we're going to be doing some of those, but not about reform because I want to do something else. I want to talk about other stuff that's going on as well. But one council in particular, Lancashire, we haven't had too much featuring going on there because when stuff has gone on there, it has been tend to be very small. Like we had the example of something where the reform leader came in as like a reform councillor was saying something and had to reach over and say no, this is what you want to say, this is what you want to do, which again you cannot do. That's big no because that just goes to show you the amount of control he was exerting over his fellow reform councillors. And then, of course, there was the stuff about the JBC pothole filler, where the previous administration had already done, the experiment on this pothole filler created by JBC to see if it would be work and be, cost effective, if it's something be good that the council could invest in. But when they did the trial, they came back and said, yeah, it's not cost effective. Even if we were to roll this out over a large scale, we don't think it would be, very cost effective for, the council. Along comes reform, and just so happened, JC, the guy who runs the company, has given Reform a lot of money. Oh, look, here they are running a larger form test scale for this pothole filling device, something which they'd already decided, was not going to be cost effective and not good, even if they rolled it out over to a wider scale. Gee, I wonder what that's going to come back as when they're finished with that test. I don't think they're going to tell anyone, to be honest. But yeah, so there's been a lot of stuff that's gone on there that hasn't, enough content for a full video, or something else has happened in another reform council, Kent, for example. At the same time that was collapsing, Cornwall collapsed as well. So a lot of these councils tend to revolve on the spotlight. We're seeing who's had the most chaos going on recently. But one of the things very interesting that happened recently was the Guardian embedded for a couple of weeks all in the Lancashire council to see just what was going on on this reform council, because this has been the one that has had the least amount of embarrassment and stuff being put out there. But the reality is that's not the case at all. If you are another non-reform Lancashire County Council member and you want to come on and sometimes and talk about all the stuff that's going on, be my guest, reach out to me. Like I say, I want councillors from these councils to come on and tell people what's going on, because very rarely, for everything that gets reported, several other things go completely unreported or untalked about. And you guys know more than anyone else what is going on and the real depth of incompetence and clownish behavior that these guys are showing and exhibiting. So by all means, get in contact with me, reach out to me, because I want you guys on here to tell your story, what's going on these councils, because it is really valuable, honestly, and that needs to happen a lot basically very, very soon rather than later, especially in the lead up to the May local elections as well. So as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel. Like I say, links down below, Patreon page, the Buy Me Coffee link, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the YouTube membership down below. We are coming up to the end of the year, so we will be doing a big review of the year at the end of the year. So look out for that as well. There is, of course, the QR code up here. If you scan that, take you straight to the Patreon page. So let's crack on then with this, because this, just goes to show you, just because we haven't been covering Lancashire, don't think that everything has been running as normal in this council. Once again, this has just been a case of they've had, shall we say, a better ringmaster that's managed to sort of keep the clowns in control. But at the end of the day, they're still clowns and they're still going to screw up. So let's go on into this. Infighting, broken promises, and of course, insisting on the national anthem. What 7 months on a Reform UK in charge actually looks like. So, Nigel Farage's party is now gunning for power. So, what is it obviously like in the places where they have already got in? We embedded with Lancashire County Council to actually find out what happens when rhetoric meets reality. And oh boy, that is the best way to sum up most of these councils. Honestly, is the best way. So on May the 22nd, 2025, a new dawn came for Lancashire. Outside of Preston's grand old county hall, 53 brand new Reform UK councillors in turquoise ties, one, of course, petite woman with an enormous turquoise hair bow. They're hot footing it now past a gaggle of protesters for their very first full council meeting. Most, of course, keep their heads down and get into the building as quickly as possible. But Joe Tedlow, a first time politician who has made, of course, a few unfortunate headlines before even taking his seat, is, of course, intrigued. He stands in the doorway, vaping as demonstrators bellow Reform is a far right party and Nigel Farage is a racist and a fascist. Tallow, now in his late 40s, with a full head of inglorious hair, I think that's how you say it, wearing, of course, a powder blue three-piece suit, insists, of course, he isn't bothered. They said they don't know us as people, he shrugs. It's a word that, of course, is slung around so much now. To be a racist, you know, what is it to be a racist? Okay, all we want to do is, of course, stand for our country, look after people within it. So we're not racist. None of us are racist. Farage, too, has, of course, denied accusations of racism, despite, of course, Reform, that they are, of course, a far-right party. There's lots of stuff to even say that. Just look at their policies, look at the stuff that they're saying. Again, not racist. Just look at some of the stuff that their councillors have been caught, saying and doing. But anyway, the protesters, of course, are entitled to their opinions. He does concede. But one thing they don't understand is that all this now is bringing now the profile of Reform higher every day. Voters realize that Reform opponents are, quote, just loony left, he says. There is no such thing as bad publicity, as they say. No, that is absolutely moronic. As someone who works in marketing, yes, there is such thing as bad publicity. That is said by stupid people who don't understand how publicity and that type of thing works, and who probably have done something bad and don't realize, what they're saying. But there you go. Is, of course, a very interesting take, of course, from a chap whose first taste of the limelight after the local election was having to explain a Hitler meme he'd posted on Facebook. Gee, what a... we're not racist. They just got to get to know us. But he's sharing a Hitler meme, guys. He's not Anyway, he posted, of course, a picture of the Führer looking at a map with a caption saying, why don't, of course, we invade them slowly? With a few men at a time in small boats. The accompanying text, of course, reading, let's be grateful this idea was never put to him, or the world as you know it would, of course, look a whole lot different. He took the post down, but, of course, defended its meaning. Gee, I wonder what he means by that and the meaning behind that. Daily, of course, boats showed, quote, no signs of abating, he noted, adding, say, we do not know, of course, who these people are, and I was likening it to an invasion. Just as in Greece, they used a wooden horse to sneak into Troy during the Trojan War, disguising their soldiers inside. What on earth? Like, even saying, oh, you don't understand, these people are like so... This just goes to show you, like, the amount of people trying to, like, whip up the fear of immigrants trying to other these people, which again is the oldest tactic like in the world of trying to like other people and scare them about immigrants and oh, aren't they scary? But anyway, Tallow is of course Precisely, exactly, of course, the sort of person that Reform's opponents might expect to, of course, find in Nigel Farage's turquoise army. A keyboard warrior with a Millwall vibe, saying, "No one likes us, we don't care." But after spending, of course, 7 months monitoring Reform's Lancastrian takeover, I have learned to put preconceptions, of course, to one side. The party is, of course, full of surprises. Take Tallow's daily job. He is a renewable energy consultant. Amongst all his colleagues in Lancashire, there is a neuroscientist, a radiographer, a truck driver, a barber, an accountant, 2 nurses, a criminal law barrister, and a milkman. With dozens, of course, polls now suggesting that Farage is, of course, headed to Downing Street, it is, of course, important to know what happens when Reform UK takes power. In May's local elections back in England, the party won 10 out of the 23 councils now up for grabs and 41% of all contested seats. Lancashire was, of course, a very good place as any other to see how this would actually play out. And as an exiled Lancastrian living just over the border in Greater Manchester, I do retain a special interest in the Red Rose County. Lancashire, of course, has a bit of everything. There are deprived seaside resorts such as Blackpool and Morecambe, where I grew up, northern versions of Farage's Clacton seat. But of course, multicultural towns such as Blackburn and Burnley, swaths of farmland plus natural beauties such as the Lune and Rim valleys, the forest of Bunlow, the rural and urban, the rich and poor, is a perfect location to put Reform's offer to the test, with their anti-woke agenda melt into insignificance once they are, of course, in charge of a 2 billion budget, now responsible for the safety of the most vulnerable children in society, as well as now trying to care for a rapidly aging population, not to mention, of course, the libraries, schools, and roads. Will they crash and burn when exposed now to the harsh realities of local government, or actually prove more competent than anyone expected? Geez, this was, you can tell this was certainly written with a trepidation, saying, what's going to happen here? What's gonna happen here? Anyway, Reform, of course, won Lancashire on a remarkably flimsy policy platform. It wasn't just here; it was pretty much everywhere. Where and still, most of these councils where they've been in charge, they haven't actually implemented any policy. They're still not actually telling people what policies they're going to do. They've got another like 4 years in charge. You cannot just sit there for 4 years and do nothing. Anyway, though many, of course, candidates spent much of their time posting anti-immigration rhetoric on social media, they were, of course, very vague about what they would actually change as councillors, perhaps because many of them, of course, didn't understand what a county councillor can actually do. Very, very true. None of these people know what a county council actually does, what even a county council actually does on their day-to-day. This has been their biggest undoing. And as I tried to explain to someone yesterday, I was speaking to someone, and they said to me, "Oh, but you know, they're new. Give them time. Give them time." They're not improving, right? They are not improving. As someone who's been following this lot since May, they are not improving. They are getting worse, considerably so. And now you're getting to a time, especially with this budget stuff that is going to happen, that is going to really expose them. These budgets over the next couple of months, you are going to see a lot of people in these areas, I think, turn very, very much against Reform once they realize what these budgets do. It ain't going to happen. So they promised it continues to cut bloated salaries, notably, of course, the £236,000 paid to, of course, the council's chief executive, as well as, quote, woke spending. They pledged to, of course, freeze council tax and, of course, fix all potholes. They said no to all 4-day weeks. Public servants should work full time for full pay, like you do. All vowed to now reintroduce weekly bin collections, something now out of course the council's control. They don't even do it. And then let's work 4 days a week. This is actually improved. This is the dumb thing. If you actually look into this, these 4-day weeks that some of these councils have trialed, and when they've done it, they've actually improved performance of these people, of the people working in the council. Oh no, they've got to work 4 days a week. Why? Oh, public servants should work work full time and for full pay like you do. But if they work better on 4 days a week, why not give them that 4-day week? If they're working better, if it improves their performance and their productivity. They just don't understand. Anyway, some, of course, of the new councillors do, of course, seem to have totally different priorities, of course, from their own party's leadership. I got chatting to Ellie Close, the councillor for Leyland South. She says that there is more than anything else. She wants to speed up diagnosis for children with special needs, education, and disabilities for SEND, saying that if we can actually fix that, that is the only thing that we manage to fix in at least the next 4 years. I would say that that would be a success, she says. I say that that's, of course, interesting, given Farage's view on overdiagnosis of SEND. That is a this is the wonderful world of the paradox between where Nigel Farage is and like where a lot of other these people stand in like reform, who seem to think like reform are gonna like answer all these questions because she's saying that, oh yeah, I want to speed up, make sure that these people, when they go for like their send test, they get sped up. Farage is complaining about overdiagnosis, not just him, but most of like the reform people in the higher positions are complaining about this. They're saying that the reason why the send stuff is like so expensive because there's just so much overdiagnosis going on. you know, um, Bit of a disconnect there, isn't there? And it's not just this. It is not just this. If you ever, and I generally mean this, if you go out and actually have some conversation with these people, there is a huge disconnect. It is insane the level of disconnect between things Farage has done and said, and other people in the reform has said, versus people of what they actually want, saying that the reform will quote actually do. There is this massive disconnect, and you have to wonder, when is that going to break? It's crazy, and I know there's a lot of people from America that have seen some of the videos I've done and said, "Oh, this is exactly like." Someone said, "Oh, this is exactly like when the Rust Belt voted for Trump." When Trump made all those promises, he's not delivered on any of the promises for the Rust Belt, but they still believed it. They still voted for it twice, I believe. But there you go. Anyway, so of course, I replied to her saying that was, of course, interesting given Farage's views of diagnosis and SEND. There we are. Where we are, back to it. So, which she said, of course, was now, of course, creating now a class of victims. She said, of course, she looks shocked and asked me, of course, to repeat it, saying, I'm not really sure what to say about that, she says, because I've got personal experience with it. I think that it's something that we currently need currently to look at. It is very clear following reform in Lancashire, it's going to be an interesting ride. Oh boy. Yeah, a lot of these people don't realize, they don't pay attention to what Farage actually says. Instead, they almost cocoon themselves in these own like world views, in their own crazy fantasy world of what Farage says. But Farage said that he did say that. He said that, oh yeah, the problem is it's massively overdiagnosis, and so it's creating a class of victims. And yet you have a councillor who wanted to actually focus on that, wanted to actually speed that up, something which contradicts absolutely with what Nigel Farage has said. If you go out and talk to the reform people, and I'm generally saying that, you should actually try and engage with some of these people, and you will see these constantly happen, and it will be completely different to some of the stuff that they think is going to happen because Farage is going to come in versus what Nigel Farage has been said in the past. And there are multiple examples of this. Multiple examples. Just a couple of months ago, there was the whole thing. I think I can't remember which union did it now. They went around and said, what do you think to Farage's comments on like Farage wanting to take away workers' rights? And they were like, these people were like shocked that Nigel Farage had even said that. They're like, no, not Nigel. Nigel would never do that to us. God, so many people are going to have a very, very rude awakening when they get these reform people. And if Nigel Farage ever becomes prime minister and we get a reform government, it's going to be an even more rude awakening for a whole lot of people. So let's continue to this. So, in his opening speech, of course, the chamber back in May, the new council leader, Stephen Atkinson, said that Reform UK have now been given a mandate for change, which is a bit of a run, considering that he was, of course, a Tory until March. Gee, once again, all these ex-Tories in Reform. Having, of course, previously led the Lower Ribble Valley District Council, where he was, in fact, in charge of bins, as well as running a business, of course, selling furniture to school. He promised now the highest levels of professionalism and, of course, courtesy, trying to balance the budget with, of course, very tricky. He warns, saying that the council is, of course, 1.2 billion in debt and must find over 100 million pounds in savings in the next 2 years. In addition to Atkinson, just 3 of Reform's Lancashire councillors have now, of course, done the job before, also for the Conservatives. And as I said just a couple of videos ago, guys, do you realize that most of these people in this party are like ex-Conservatives? And just a couple of months ago, and then constantly, you guys were hating the Conservatives about all the stuff that they were doing and the stuff they're saying. But now that's okay that Reform is welcoming all these like failure Conservatives in? God, at some point this is going to break. At some point this is going to break because this is creating a big problem. This is why a lot of the infighting, bear in mind, comes from Reform. These ex-Conservatives versus like the true Reformers, and they don't get along. But it continues. Atkinson does insist that real world experience is, of course, more important than the local authority service. As he unveils now his all male cabinet, none of Reform's 9 female council members made the top table. Gee, I wonder why. He puts, of course, former executive at the monitoring organization of the AA in charge of transport. He gives a mental health nurse their health brief, and of course, in a decision that subsequently being questioned, makes the owner of a private care company the cabinet member now for adult social care. Anyway, for the first few months, Reform say a lot, but do, of course, very. So in the first few months, Reform say a lot, but do very little. And that has been Lancashire Council, pretty much. They, of course, removed the word climate change from one of the council's departments. They freezed their own salaries and then quietly accepted that they cannot actually force the chief executive to take a pay cut. One afternoon, they passed a free speech motion that seems to be an excuse to bring up grooming gangs made up now of prominently Asian men by saying that Barradance's Creasy's recent report on group-based child sexual exploitations and abuse highlighted denial and avoidance now of ethnicity issues, supporting, of course, the need now to encourage to speak up, encouraging a speak up culture. And another, they even voted now to play the national anthem at the start of each full council meeting. What? That again was just bizarre. You see what I mean by when they've done stuff on this council, it's just been so small. There just hasn't been enough comment to make a full video about the grooming gang one. That is, yeah, it's insane. But this is typical. The whole Baroness Creasy, when you look at this, the whole report has been used predominantly, even now, even though they're getting now a new report on it. A lot of these people are now trying to exploit a lot of these victims to stoke racial hatred. And we've seen that very recently play out too, which is really sad that they are doing that. And unfortunately, not enough people are calling them out, which is also kind of bad as well. And then, like I say, playing the national anthem before the start of each full council meeting. Why? Why are you doing that? That's a waste of time. In, of course, June, Farage then arrives then for a visit, saying that the first, quote, saving should be, of course, the scrapping of the £5,200 contract now to provide the ergonomic chairs for Lancashire County Council staff, most of whom he claims now work from home. Local reporters do reveal later that just £20,000 has so far been spent now on fancy chairs. He says, Anyway, back to where we were. Yeah, so just £20,000 to be sent on fancy chairs. He says that Reform's unit of cost cutters, modelled, of course, on Donald Trump's Doge initiative, will arrive in the county hall the following week. They never even crossed the threshold after a row over data protection regulations. Bear in mind, none of the Doge unit, none of these guys has arrived in any of these county halls. Why? Because in Kent, they tried this, and then first of all, they couldn't get over the data protection stuff. First of all, like that was a big hurdle which they could not cross. And then the second was the stuff that they could look at, they weren't finding anything to cut. And they realized it was just embarrassing that they'd made a big song and dance about all this. And they still do to some extent, but they do it really quietly now because they know it's embarrassing. They know that there's nothing else to cut. Like I say, when you've got these budgets coming out next week, it's going to be very interesting to see what the public reaction in some of these places is going to be over the next couple of months when these budgets start to, come out. Because we're going to see next week is like the last full council meeting and like last couple of meetings for these councils. That's where the budget is going to be passed. And then, of course, it goes to full council meetings in January. And that could be where it really starts to get interesting. Really starts to get interesting. I will tell you that now. But there's going to be a lot of pushback, I think, against some of these budgets. And once again, I think a lot of people that voted in these people are going to have some very rude awakenings. So back to this. In July, Reform, of course, then introduced a new flags policy, declaring that, of course, the council will now prioritise only the Union flag and the flag of England and Lancashire flag, royal flags, military flags, and ensigns. In other words, no pride flag, no rainbow flags. One Lib Dem councillor does suggest that Reform are now dishonouring the lives of trans people, like the murdered teenager Brianna Gray, but Atkinson, of course, gives them a very short shrift, saying that this country is now more fragmented than it's ever been, and we need now to come together as a country, he says. Free speech now is an individual situation and should be defended absolutely. So if you want to wear a pride lanyard, so be it. That is your choice. This is a civic institution that should be now concentrating on providing public services, not being now overly political for frustrated people who couldn't become MPs. So what? Bear in mind is typical what you would see. By the way, this is from what a lot of these people think that these councils, these councillors that are here, these are just people that just weren't good enough to be MPs, which says a lot about what they think. Because I can guarantee you now, at the next general election, a couple of these councillors, there's going to be an awful lot of falling out about who gets that MP nomination. There is going to be an awful lot of falling out about who gets that MP nomination. Guarantee you that now. It's pretty much written in stone because that is a weird thing that they believe. And it's not just them, it's this almost strange culture that has infected what people think about local councils. And this is part of the reason why they're just so bad. Like, because they believe these insane ideas and like theories and think that, everyone else is corrupt and on the take. And they're not, and they're like holier than thou, and only they can save people. But when all their rhetoric has met reality, it has failed time and time again. They haven't really delivered a lot. They've done nothing in this, and they should feel bad. And the problem is, next year, a lot of their policies that they'd been living on come to an end, and they have to make some very critical decisions. A lot of these councils, they cannot just live forever on the previous administration's policies because those come to an end. They have to be voted on again. Officers need councillors to make important decisions and to vote on stuff in like committees and council meetings. Will they actually do that? Will they make these decisions? Doubt it, because they've been dodging this so much. This is why one of the things that we've been hearing a lot of recently, officers who work in these councils are getting very, very annoyed at these reform people because they are refusing to make decisions, saying, "Oh no, you make it." They're like, I can't make it because that's your job. That's why you were elected. So yeah, a lot of I think interesting stuff coming next year on a lot of this stuff because yeah. Anyway, bear with. So Reform, of course, do like to talk a lot about free speech, but they have remarkably thin skins. One day I arrived at a cabinet meeting to find a very furious Jed Murphy, the lead member for resources for HR and property. A boring little job title that disguises the fact that, as far as I can tell, he is in charge of trying to cut jobs, selling off buildings, and lead the war on woke. He is fuming because the Lancashire Evening Post has done some photoshopping on its front page to make it look like Atkinson is wielding a chainsaw and Elon Musk style, saying the editor really ought to apologize. It is disgraceful, fumes Murphy. The editor, of course, then declined to apologize. Very good, by the way. I like the fact that the editor did decline to apologize, but that is also kind of funny that they are just so thin-skinned because this is what that guy is trying to do. And this is something else that they are doing, selling off buildings. Some of the things that again, this is what I would love to talk about some more councillors about from some of these councils. They are selling off all the silverware, all the stuff that they can, anything that they can get away with selling. Apparently, they are trying to sell it off as much as they possibly can. So back to this. Murphy, of course, has a very striking appearance. His very longish grey hair, slicked back, of course, like Nick Cave. He's wearing a ring on every finger, a nod to his days now as a heavy metal roadie for a band that he has forbidden me for saying because, quote, they'd hate to be associated with Reform. Gee, I wonder which one that is. He likes to, of course, present himself as a bit of a rogue. One day I complimented him on his tartan scarf and says that he was a present from one of my lady friends. Plural. Sometimes I do wonder if, of course, he is just trolling me. We had a pub lunch and he orders a pint and pie and chips with none of, quote, the extra stuff. He means, of course, vegetables. He is deliberately provocative, once standing up in a debate about local government reorganization to try and pay homage to Enoch Powell, who he calls a, quote, very prescient individual. You see, this is the kind of stuff I keep on saying. I never heard about this until this, and I just still can't believe it. But this is why, honestly, I want to speak to more to councils because they know the stuff and they see a lot more stuff that goes on that doesn't get reported on this. So it continues. Murphy, of course, does not like any government plans to try to simplify Lancashire's muddle of a district, unitary and county councils by replacing them with just 2 or 3-tier single authorities. It would, of course, be the same mistake as the UK joining the EU, he suggests, something that Powell opposed back in the 70s. Saying, I agree with Enoch, he tells the council chamber. Jesus Christ. Enoch said that local identity and national identity were much more important than economic efficiency. And that's the concern that I have. In future years, when residents get asked to pay more for council tax going forward, they'll get more and more disenchanted. If you think reform revolutions are, of course, were strong now, just wait until a couple of years' time. It's going to be even stronger. Very, very much doubt it. So after, of course, leaving the rock and roll lifestyle behind, Murphy was, of course, an academic and then a data chief over at the Northwest Development Agency before sitting now as a Tory councillor, again, another ex-Tory, in Rib Valley for over 15 years. He loves data and is an AI evangelist, telling me in great detail about special AI camera technology that Reform have now installed. That's me. That Reform have now installed on Lancashire's bin lorries to try and work out how many potholes the county has. We'll see if that works or not, or whether that was just a giant waste of money. He's, of course, very excited now about the 2 new pothole filling machines that the council now is leasing from the Blackburn firm called Multivelo, which can do the work now in 2 hours. This is what I was telling you about that pothole filling machine that they've tried, they've trialed it, didn't work. For some reason, they're wheeling it back out, doing a larger scale. When originally the trial said, yeah, even if we scale it up, it doesn't look like it will be cost effective. So he claims, of course, to be working 18-hour days. I'm sure he is. Rising at 6 to now pore over spreadsheets and trying to work straight through till 1 a.m. I'm sure he is. I go, of course, to his office now on the office now, and on the whiteboard, he keeps now a running tally of how many HMOs, and that's houses of multiple occupancy, there are in each area of Lancashire has. HMOs now are a reform obsession, along now with asylum hotels. They are, of course, powerless to stop the latter, as they find out within a few weeks now of taking power when a local hotel, the Tickle Trout, closes now to paying customers, and Afghan refugees moved in. So they're now, of course, focused on HMOs, which they now claim are hotbeds for criminality and illegal activity, saying that family homes are now being stuffed full of old, undocumented, fighting age males who terrorize communities and frighten women. Again, this whole these people are soldiers. Again, it's all this ridiculous rhetoric that they like to spout, but it's all trying to scare and frighten people, honestly. So when other, of course, reform councils have now made very unhelpful headlines, by example, for appointing a teenage leader in Warwickshire, or someone, of course, who thinks you get your backbenchers on side by telling them to suck it up in Kent. Murphy says that Farage and his lieutenants now see Lancashire as a beacon. Quote, they regard us as a kind of model council in the Reform Central Office, he claims. This is, and we've said why. It's because all this stuff you've seen hasn't been reported too widely. You know, there aren't too much of the stuff that has gotten out. And it looks like, bear in mind, it looks like, as we've said, that they're doing okay. But that couldn't be further from the truth, as you are seeing here. You know, couldn't be further from the truth. So he claims, of course, particularly when it comes now to cost cutting and restructuring. Now he's, of course, looked at the books. Things are even worse than Reform, of course, thought when they were took in now the reins, he said. They need to find over £57 million of savings in the next year, 95 million the year after, and 133 million after that, and a whopping 303 million package now of cuts by 2029. That's an insane amount. That's an insane amount that they are going to try. Good luck. Good luck trying to do that while keep essential services running. The full impact of this now will only be revealed in their budget next year. But of course, in late November, Reform identified a £21.9 million of initial savings over a 3-year period. Most of it coming from not filling vacancies, reducing reliance on agency workers, and trying to streamline procurements. So basically, you're not hiring people. You're trying to make your council slimmer. Again, good luck with trying to run those services when your council staff become effectively overworked and understaffed. Good luck with that as well. As well as trying to cutting, of course, council grants. But they also now on plan going on big on AI, claiming that it offers, quote, productivity gains of nearly 100,000 hours. Yeah, good luck in producing that with, data protection, all that. Oh, honestly, sooner or later, I think there's going to be a bigger story that comes out about Lancashire. It's being baked in. I think the stories about Lancashire will maybe get more crazy next year on that front. They, of course, seem to make things that they can make big savings by trying to use AI prompts to try and speed up assessments for children applying for education, healthcare plans, and adults needing care. Oh my God. That isn't worrying at all, is it? That isn't very worrying at all. I asked, of course, Morphin if they will have to raise, of course, council tax to try and balance the books, and he refused to answer. He said, I'm not going to deliver the budget here. You'll have to wait for it, but I think you can probably guess. I guess that they will have to raise it by a maximum of 4.99%. He, of course, doesn't deny it. He said reform's challenge at the local level in Lancashire is to try to show competence and, of course, to show that we can actually manage a big council with a budget of over £2 billion a year, he says. What we're doing in Lancashire, he says, is trying to localising reform's policy agenda. It's about trying to forensically save money. It's about challenging orthodoxy. It's about challenging the whole DEI regime, its civic pride. What on Yeah, and here's the thing, it's not going well. It's not going well at that one. At a meeting, of course, in October, he then announces that the cabinet will now be rewriting the council's inclusion and fairness policy. Oh, I didn't hear about this. I didn't hear about this. So that DEI, he says, doesn't spread any further within the organization. He says that he claims there are now 18 substantive DEI posts within the council, costing the organisation over £1 million more or less. And there are also over 2,000 roles whereby a significant majority of the job function of the council employees is related to DEI activities. Never mind, of course, that those roles do include things like social workers, youth workers, basically anyone whose jobs described include any reference to diversity. All in all, it is now costing the council £37 million, he claims. Money that, of course, be better spent elsewhere. Wow. Well, yeah. Good luck when you get rid of all those social care workers and youth care workers. Because that's not going to have a bad effect, is it? Oh, I didn't know about this. Oh, we're definitely gonna have to look more into that. Wow. Um, Sarah Barnes, one of the Labour councillors, and of course, a persistent thorn in Reform's side, stands up saying that now she is choosing a Choose Love t-shirt to support a refugee charity, exposing now tattooed covered arms, saying, I don't think it's all appropriate for a cabinet of all white men to be making decisions about inclusion, she says. This is not what inclusion is. She is heckled, of course, by several Reform councillors who then call her racist. After, of course, the meeting, a young guy called Tom Pickup edits the clip of Barnes' intervention to make it sound as if she doesn't think that white men should be allowed to make decisions full stop. It then goes viral. I didn't hear about this at all. And of course, the comments blew up. It was awful, very much. Saying that she's racist, she's sexist, she needs stringing up, said Barnes. Bear in mind, today, Richard Tice has come out and said that he is worried for Reform councillors' safety. Is he going to comment about this? About this? No, he's not going to do it at all. Pickup, of course, says that he edited the video for, quote, brevity, and of course that he removed it on learning that Barnes was, of course, upset. Oh yeah, I just edited it for brevity to make it, looks like she said she was something. Reality think that he realized he could get sued for that, and I think he took it down pretty quickly by the sounds of that. Tallow, of course, then posted messages, of course, to Barnes' Facebook page, telling her, quote, "We enjoyed putting you in your place. Point of order, you are racist. And if we singled out a panel of men or women that was all coloured, would we be racist? Because you called us racist, and now you are the biggest of them all. People get roles on merit, not colour, not gender. It's our house, and you're playing our game now. You're just along for the ride." What a nice person. A few days later, Tallow then appears, of course, in Preston Crown Court, summoned by a judge to try and explain why he failed to turn up for jury duty, having previously deferred it 3 times because he was, quote, too busy being a counsellor. His latest excuse is, of course, a very unusual one, but, of course, washes with the judge. He says he missed his last jury service on doctor's orders because now he was recuperating after a trip to Turkey for an eyelid lift to be corrected. Quote, overlapping hooded eyes which would, quote, cause sweat to run into his eyes, and it was finding reading and, of course, very stinging, according to the court report put by the local paper. Pickup, of course, meanwhile, is currently suspended from reform after, of course, he emerged. He had been a member of a WhatsApp group where one member allegedly now called for a mass Islam genocide. Well, again, what a wonderful person this sounds. God. Reform vetting once again at its best. He was then encouraging others to stockpile weapons to try and attack lefties and migrants. Confronted, he admits now to being in the group, but says 90%, 99% of what occurs in the group, I don't see. I'm sure he doesn't see it. Anyway, things, of course, could start to get, of course, crunchy for reform in Lancashire when they, of course, try and launch a consultation on closing over 5 local authorities for old people's homes and day centres and trying to move the residents now into private care sectors. Again, we covered this when this sort of happened. The buildings are, of course, dilapidated, they're not fit for purpose, and they'll cost millions to fix, is essentially, of course, the argument. And they reckon that they can save over £4 million by selling off the family silver, as one Labour councillor puts it. The idea now immediately provokes controversy and now a flurry of bad press, largely thanks to the 92-year-old resident of one of those care homes now earmarked for closure, who then becomes the face and the voice of the campaign to keep them open. I visit Dorothy Duxford of Woodlands in Caremore Lane and Accrington, where she's lived for over 12 years in a cozy room surrounded by family photographs. She said the former nurse is now devastated, angry, and frustrated at the thought of being evicted. And she cries, saying, I've always said that I'm staying here till either my death or they forcibly remove me. That is how I feel. The Woodlands is not just a building, she says. This is my home. I sold my home to pay to live here. She's very doubtful that she has any money that will now be saved by shunting her and the other residents into a private sector, and is now worried, of course, about the fate of over the 70 different staff who she described as angels. Always remember, and this is the big thing that I always have to try and stress, because sometimes I don't think I stress this enough. Local councils are very important. And I know, oh, you've said that many times before. They are. But local councils are an area where you can make change very, very quickly, a lot quicker by then instead of like going to try and do it in Westminster. Westminster takes a long time to affect change. When a local council, you can make change pretty quickly. It can be done quite fast. And the thing is, these people, when they get in, when they do stuff like this, it will have a big consequence on people's lives. They will affect more than people think. And this is once again, the problem that people just have not realized the amount of importance of what goes on in local councils. Just look at some of the interviews we've done with local councils, and you'll see for yourself. People just don't realize the importance of these local councils and what they do, and that these people have got in and causing non-stop stuff like this and causing stuff this to happen. This is just the beginning of this stuff. They've got, like I say, 4 more years. Although less than that now. Of this stuff. They're going to do a lot of damage. They're going to do a lot of damage in their time in office. So, where were we? So back to this. We meet just after Farage, of course, announced his plans now for a government that would include abolishing indefinite leave to remain, and of course, deporting hundreds of thousands of people, maybe many more. She's, of course, worried that about reforms proposals could see many of her angels deported. She said they want to send all the people that have worked so hard here back to where they came from. If no people from abroad worked here, it couldn't run. Her daughter, Frances, writes to Jordan Fox, the local reform councillor, and receives an unexpected reply. It turns out his grandmother is also a resident, having visited Woodlands multiple times. I believe that this is an excellent facility, he writes, before exclaiming that he, quote, has no choice but to personally distance himself from many of the decision-making processes as a county councillor. I am expected to act impartially without any bias. Even then, as a councillor, you can speak up. That is insane to learn that. That is insane to learn that. How are you not? How are you not going against your party and fighting to keep these places open? Oh, that's why, because of the amount of control these reform people are under. I keep on trying to stress this. There's that office down in London that is controlling them, and especially here in Lancashire, they have a lot of control, and this is where more and more infighting starts. And this councillor should be fighting to save these places. You know, you can act in that way. You just go, oh yeah, I'd like to declare an interest because this is happening. You still can do that and fight on one of these scrutiny committee meetings for that. So Fox, of course, excusing himself now from all the relevant scrutiny committees. In his place, he now sends Joe Tolwell, who tries and fails to stop opposition councillors from asking questions by saying, quote, if these were normal councillors, that would, of course, be fine. But these are councillors that have that have now whipped up a lot of these issues throughout the country. So apparently these are not normal councillors. This is insane. I'm gonna have to try and get in contact with all these Lancashire councillors because this is again another place where I want to talk to. So if you do happen to know anyone who is a county councillor on this council, or you know them, please tell them I want to speak to these people. I really, really do, because it is really important. Some of this stuff gets out, because some of this stuff I haven't even heard of before, and it's shocking to hear that this hasn't gone out further. But this is what is happening on these councils, and it is these councillors who know more than anything other. That's why I want to talk to them. I want to speak to them. I don't really care what party they are from, because they are the ones who will expose and show just how bad these people are on this. So it continues. Among them is now, of course, Kim Snape, another Labour councillor, whose patch, of course, includes Groves House, just another homes now earmarked for closure. She has been asking questions on Facebook about the potential conflict of interest involving the cabinet member in charge of adult social care. Former church minister, Rev. Graham Dalton, who runs a private care home company with his wife Dalton, didn't like it, Snape tells me, and threatened her with legal action. She accused Dalton of behaving in a very unchristian way, like posting on Facebooks that mocked her appearance, including one that said, just look at the state of it. With lots of now poo emojis. Snape's hands aren't entirely clean, with one of, again, her own posts about Dalton continuing now a montage of images, including including now of a placard that depicts him now, of course, with devil's horns. Dalton says that he has been advised by his company ownership amounts to, of course, neither a peculiarly a financial or non-peculiar interest. But Snape believes that questions do, of course, remain. For example, if a resident's family member had to take their loved one out of Go's house and needed to fund a private care home provision, if they phoned up his company, would that business, of course, be turned down? A spokesperson for the council says that these services provided by Dalton's company fall under healthcare. As such, a clinical nursing support, which is now distinct from the local social services commissioned by the county council. For all the talks about trying to fight the woke blob and trying to bring in common sense and back to British politics, is it how now reform handles these very human battles that will, of course, ultimately decide whether voters judge Farage to be fit to move into Downing Street. And that is, again, I think very, very true. And I think the more of these stories that start to come out, like this one perfectly sums it up. They're closing these care homes, forcing these people out of their homes. I guarantee you, if you spoke to one of these people, there are other options. I guarantee you there are other options where these homes could maybe move people out temporarily while they fix them up and fix them, and they can then move them back. Guarantee you there would be cheaper ways to do it, but reform don't want to do that. So they can, of course, mess about, of course, with flags, and of course, try to play the national anthem and rail against DI all they like. But if they shut down your mum's nursing home, will you vote for them? That's very true indeed. You know, local politics, people don't realize, can very, very much affect more people how they vote on for their MPs at national time when that comes around. And I think seeing all this chaos happening at a local level, bear in mind in May, I have no doubt they were going to win more councils. And oh boy, it's about to get a whole lot more busier after May. I do worry about that. I worry about my own town going, reform. I think that's going to be a disaster if it does do that. But this is just what we're trying to fight against. And we've got to warn people. Like this is what they're doing. This is what they're up to. They're absolute incompetent shambles. You don't want them anywhere near power. But there's still people who still think, oh well, don't worry, they'll be great. No, they won't. They won't. Anyway, so sitting, of course, at the back of the meeting with a big now St. George's flag is, of course, Phil Price, whose 93-year-old mum lives in Grove's house. He believes that Darton does stand now to benefit now from the care home closures. He said, I'll be honest with you, he tells me, I'm a paid-up member of Reform, and I'm disgusted with them. I wrote to Dalton, I even wrote to Nigel Farage, because I thought they were going to come and change everything. And all they're doing now is coming in and tearing people's lives apart. And that's someone who is a paid-up member of Reform. I've said it now, I think a lot of people are going to be in for a very rude awakening if they ever get into power locally or even nationally. Very, very much so. So that's where this is off. I put it to him that Reform, of course, did make it very clear that they were going to make cuts in Lancashire to save money and to, quote, eliminate waste. He said, if there are parents who have paid into the system all their lives, worked very hard for this country, if they're waste, then they might as well, of course, just give up, he says. I asked him, of course, why he voted Reform. He said, I thought they were going to change Great Britain for the good. Stop all the boats and everything coming in. And to be fair to the people who've paid into the system, who've lived here all their lives. All the politicians, they're all in it for themselves. I think I was really excited about them now. I'm really excited about them. And now I'm disillusioned. Good. Honestly, good. I'm really glad that ended that with someone being incredibly disillusioned with their council, with their Reform council. Good. That's what you want to see. That is honestly what you want to see on this. And I think going forward, as we've seen down in other councils, that seems to be a lot of people's takeaway who voted for it. They've become very quickly delusioned with these Reform councils. Bear in mind, if they won more councils in May, might them winning, power in May in a couple of these councils disillusion a lot of people? Oh, I think they will. I think they very, very much so will. Because if I was a Labour MP running in that county, my election cycle would be a vote for Reform throws your nan out of the care home. And I would get a picture of like Nigel Farage like throwing an old person out of a care home. That's what I'd do. That's what I'd be doing now, not waiting for it. I'd be making that very, very clear. But yeah, if one of those, like say, councillors wants to come and like talk to me, I am more than happy to speak to you, because you guys know probably even more stuff that's going on these councils, more stuff, and I really want to talk to you guys. I don't even care, whatever party you come from. Come tell us what's really going on. You guys know more than anything else. So if you do happen to know a councillor from Lancashire, and they want to come on and they want to tell people this is what it's real like in the chamber against these guys, by all means, yeah, I want to hear what they've got to say. By all means, I'm just really interested in hearing what they've got to say, because most people they don't get talked to. I think that's a real shame, because they've got a lot of wealth and experience when it comes to like local politics, and very often they don't get talked to, which I think is kind of a shame. And I think in an area like this, where honestly, you want to stop reform as much as possible, more of these councillors need to be put front and center and, be told this is what's going on. Like, this is how bad they are. This is what they're doing. This is the damage that they're doing. And I am more than happy to platform any of those councillors, regardless of what party they come from. So, as always, let me know what you think about all this stuff. I'm sure there are a lot of people in Lancashire that are very, very passionate about this now, and maybe even some people that have changed their minds about that, which I think will be quite good to see on that one. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. It's been a long one today, I know that one, but I think a good session, to be honest, and we haven't talked about much about Lancashire, so I'm very happy that we are here on this. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.